In this lesson, I'm going to demonstrate the concept of functions in Python. In other words, what are functions? How do we use them in Python? And as we write code, what do they do for us? So basically, a function is a block of organized, reusable code that is used to perform a single related action. Functions provide better modularity for your application and a high degree of code reusing. And Python gives you several built-in functions, and we've been working with a function like print. You can use the function several times, telling Python to print the output. So in a nutshell, simply think of functions as blocks. So it's a block of code that you can use several times within your entire program that you're creating. Okay, and this block of code contains multiple lines of instructions telling Python to do something for us. The benefit of using function is that you don't have to repeat every single time the same code over and over again. Essentially, you're combining a set of code or multiple lines of code into one block, giving the block a name. And all you do is you call that name, and Python would execute the entire code within the block. Okay, so just the concept of functions. Here's an example. So let's say we have a simple print function, and within this example there are 4 lines of code using a single print function. So we have print happy birthday to you, and then it's basically a birthday song, right? Within this block, so think of the entire code as one block, and what we can do is we can name this block or define this block. And Python allows us to use the keyword called def, or definition, right? DEF, and I'll demonstrate that shortly. But for now, just the concept that multiple lines of code can be grouped together into a single block, and that block can be given a name. Okay, so let me bring up, for instance, the Python shell here, the editor, by clicking on File, New File, and let me resize so that you can see. Okay, great. So here, for instance, I'm going to start with a comment, a simple print function, and I'm going to say print happy birthday to you, and repeat the same thing. Of course, I can always copy and paste, do the same thing, copy my lines so I don't have to type all the time, right? So just making things go faster. So happy birthday, and I'm going to say dear Emily, and then my last line of code would also be happy birthday to you. And then I can use maybe a blank line. I'm going to say print hope you have a wonderful birthday. Okay, so just a simple block of code. Now think of this as if you were to use the same lines of code in later part of your program, right, that you're writing. You'd have to copy and paste again, or type the entire code again, and we can group this code and give it a definition. In other words, create a definition for the entire block of code. But first, let me run this. So I'm going to go run module. Of course, Python always asks me to save. Click OK. And I'm going to go up to my documents here, bring up the data files and Python folder, and I'm going to call it block. Click save, and Python would execute the program for you. Okay, so move this away. There we go. Okay, so here's the output. And notice the \n within my code simply means it's a new line or an empty line. So just wanted to quickly demonstrate an example writing a block of code using the print function. Okay, we can also create functions. So functions are simply blocks begin with the keyword def or definition followed by the function name and parentheses. So for instance, we can say something like def happy birthday Emily and a set of parentheses, or def happy birthday Jack, set of parentheses, and so on. The code block within every function starts with a colon and is indented as well. For right now, just creating functions that we can either use the built-in functions like the print function, or we can create our own functions as well. But before we actually create our own functions, just understand the concept of definition here. In other words, if I were to use the def happy birthday Emily parentheses, I can take this entire code, for instance, or here's my code, right? Let me bring that up. Here it is. So I can take the entire code and I can define the code and call it happy birthday Emily. So for instance, if I were to define this block of code, I can say something like def happy birthday, I'm going to say Emily, okay, and of course my set of parentheses. So all I've done is simply created a definition and I called it happy birthday Emily with a set of parentheses. Of course I can use some parameters within the parentheses, but for right now I'm going to demonstrate that later. For right now, just the definition concept, right? You can define happy birthday Emily, and then this definition called, or which I named happy birthday Emily, you can name it anything else, would contain all of these print functions in between, right? So here, for example, right after the happy birthday song, I can say happy birthday Emily and a set of parentheses. We'll make some spaces so we can see. Of course, we need to make sure that our spellings are correct. So essentially what we're doing here is make some spaces so we can see. Perfect. So here's our definition. We defined happy birthday Emily, right? Now what does this happy birthday Emily contain, right? This block contains these 4 statements. So these 4 print strings. And at the end, I can say something like happy birthday Emily, I'm calling it, right? So let's run this by clicking on run module. And of course, we forgot our colon, right? So we need to place our colon after the definition. There we go. And it wants me to indent also. And notice the reason why I'm showing you step by step so that we follow the rules, right, that I mentioned earlier that are displayed on the slide here. That the code block within every function starts with a colon and is indented. So if I did not indent, Python tells me that, hey, we need to indent our code block. Great. Let's one more time. Click OK. And this time your code is executed. So here Python ran the 4 print statements for you. So it's a simple print function, and then of course we use the definition. Now what happens when I go to my shell directly and simply say happy birthday? Let's see what happens. So when I say happy birthday Emily, set of parentheses, and notice in this instance it will simply print all of the 4 statements once again. So now essentially happy birthday Emily and a set of parentheses is a function, just like we have our print function with a set of parentheses. So I don't have to within my code every time write print or recreate the happy birthday song every time. All I have to do is just call this function within my code. Okay, so I hope this concept is clear at this point. We need to first make sure that we create a definition, give it a name. In this instance, we called it happy birthday Emily, set of parentheses, and of course, the rule says that we need to have a colon. And right after the colon, the code needs to be indented, just like right here. And then we call the function. Okay, so here's a simple concept. And within your shell, you keep running the same, you call the same function, it will run the set of code that is within this block. So here's the example that I just demonstrated. Function blocks begin with the keyword def followed by the function name and parentheses, such as def happy birthday Emily and def happy birthday Jack, and so forth. So here, once again, let me bring my code back up, expand this. What if I were to create another definition? Okay, so let's just copy it, so save some time. Copy this code, go right after the print, paste it. In this instance, I'm going to say def happy birthday Jack, right? So all I did was create another definition, but this time is for Jack because both of their birthdays are today. So instead of Emily, I'm going to say Jack, and the rest of the song stays the same. And here I'm going to use the rest of the code also. Okay, of course, make sure our names change and they follow the same definition name, happy birthday Jack, and I'm going to call the function here. And of course, I'm going to say have a wonderful birthday Jack. And here on top, I'm going to say Emily. Perfect. So nice program that we're creating, right? So it's two definitions now, happy birthday Emily, and then I have happy birthday Jack. Same birthday song. Of course, within the strings you can have any text you want. And let's see what happens when I run this. So click run module, click OK, and notice within the Python shell it gives you both blocks of code. Of course, right after Emily, we can always create a new line here. And let's run again. So this way, you can go back and forth within your code. So right after you create a new line, notice you have your birthday song and hope you have a wonderful birthday Emily, and then your birthday song and hope you have a wonderful birthday Jack. And all you did was created a definition or a block, and you called it happy birthday Jack, and you call your functions. So within my Python shell, for instance, if I were to say happy birthday Jack as an example, it's going to give me the birthday song for Jack. Now in this instance, since my birthday song is between the definition, it's not going to give me the hope you have a wonderful birthday Jack, because that's after you call the function. If this was part of the function, then I will get my output. So I hope the concepts of functions and creating functions is clear, or defining functions at this point. All right, now parameters in functions. So for example, happy birthday Jack, set of parentheses. Now within these parentheses, I can also provide or give certain parameters. So the syntax is simply defining or giving a function name such as happy birthday Jack, and then within the set of parentheses, you give your parameters. So essentially, you define the function docstring, your function suite, and then eventually end your block by a return expression. In other words, you have to type return within your code if you're giving parameters within your functions. So the statement return or expression exits a function, optionally passing back an expression to the caller. So it's a good idea to use return. And calling a function, you simply define a function that only gives it a name, specifies the parameters that are to be included in the function, and structures the block of code. And once the basic structure of a function is finalized, you can then execute it by calling it from another function or directly from the Python prompt. So for instance, we have been calling functions directly from the Python prompt. You can also call a function within a function, right? So you can embed functions within other functions. But for right now, we're going to keep things simple so that we understand at this level the concept of function, creating a function, and then calling a function. So next, let me demonstrate the concept of providing parameters within a function. So for instance, happy birthday Jack has a set of parentheses. Obviously, we can provide a parameter within these parentheses. So we can define the print me string as in this example. This prints a passed string into this function, and we can call it later on and end it with return. And now you can call print me function, and it will print the desired text within the string. So let me in fact demonstrate. Let me bring up my code. Here's my code. So I'm going to click File. Let's click on New File, because we are going to create a new one. And of course, let me close this previous one. Here's our blank editor. Great. So here, let's create a function definition, for instance, one more time, and assign a parameter. Okay. So of course, I'm going to use a comment here. So I'm going to say function definition is here. And then let's define print me, for example. And I'm going to call it str. Okay, so here's the parameter called str as string. And Python, notice, automatically indents it. So as soon as I place the colon within my line of code, it knows that here is a definition. So the next line, as I enter on my keyboard, the cursor automatically starts blinking at an indentation. So here I'm going to say this prints a pass string into this function. And then I'm going to provide the print function called str. And then of course return to end. And I use a semicolon to return end. My next comment would be something like, now you can call the print me function, right? So now we can call the print me function. And here, of course, my standard print. I'm going to say like, I am first call to user defined function. And the reason why I call it user defined, because it's something that you're creating, right? You're creating your own functions. You're not using the built-in functions in Python. You're actually creating your own blocks of code or own functions. So I'm first called to define user function, and my next print would be again, and it'll be something like again my second call to the same function, right? Perfect. So here's our function definition print me. This prints a pass string into the function, and I call the string and return to end. So let's run this and see what happens. So click on run module. Of course, the source must be saved. Click OK. I'm going to give it a name called function. Click save. And what Python does, it executes the code and simply says, I'm first called the user-defined function, again, call to the same function. So I hope this helps practice using functions. In this lesson, I demonstrated and we talked about the concept of functions, how to use functions, how to use the built-in functions, and how to create our own functions. And of course, the concept of calling a function. So functions are simply blocks of code that you write, you give it a name, and then you call the function by that name. So practice, and let's move to our next lesson.